For this lab, we're going to use the Polygonal Lasso Tool to select a bottle and change the color of the contents. So go into the lab 6, grab the bottles, and we're going to take one of the bottles. Right now they're all red. We're going to make it blue. The one on the very left, we're going to turn it into a blue bottle. And you're like, but that's impossible. It's red. No, it is totally possible. We looked at the lasso tool. There's a couple other lasso tools in here. If you hold them and do a little fly out, you'll see that you have a lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool. Let's talk about the polygonal lasso tool. It's not so good for curves, but you can fake curves if you do small jumps. With the polygonal lasso tool, you don't need to hold it down. With the lasso, you held and you click, and as long as you keep the mouse button held, you can trace out a shape. With the polygonal lasso tool, you do a click, let go, and it'll put out this, it looks like a spider web kind of thing. You'll be like, oh no, I don't know how to get rid of this. Everywhere you click, it'll be like putting a little thumbtack down, and it'll start another little spider webby thing, until you come all the way back to where you started and click on the first point. It'll close that off and turn it into a selection. Or if you can't find your first point, just do a double click. So here's the tool. I'm going to start on a corner here. I'll do a click, and there's that little spider webby sort of thing that I was telling you about. So if I were to move over to here and click, doink, it puts another little sticky point down. And if I move a little bit down the bottle and do another click, move a little bit down the bottle, do another click. Now you might find when you're doing this that you come to the end of the screen. Look at this, I'm almost off the bottom of the screen. Not a big deal. If you hold down the space bar, you'll temporarily get the hand tool. You can pan further up the image, then let go of the space bar and continue with your clicking. So see what you can come up with. Work your way around the bottle, and notice I'm kind of not going outside the bottle, but I'm also not going inside the bottle. I'm getting it right on that little edge around there. Guys, you zoom in a little bit. Do a Command+. You'll have to pan around the bottle, but that's okay. If you get really stuck, like if you got this like jumbled up mess of like a spider just sneezed all over it, just do a double click. Watch this. If I do a double click anywhere, let's say I come over to here and I do a double click, click, click. It finds the starting point and it connects straight to it. I started here, I jumped over to here, I worked my way down, and I'm like, I can't find my starting point. A double click, connected it with its little starting point over there. But if you do find your starting point, when you get back to it and you hover over that first point that you clicked on, you'll see this little circle icon appear. And when you click the circle, it'll finish off the selection for you. It'll turn it into a fully selected object. Another thing you can do when you get close to the edge, if you don't want to use the hand tool, if you kind of rub up against the edge, it'll scroll automatically for you. So scroll it a little further than you need, and then back up a little bit. And notice when I hover over the point where I started, I see this little circle icon appear, which tells me that if I click, it'll close this off and turn it into a marqueed selection. And I now have a selected bottle. Now that we have a selection, we've isolated this area for further editing. And in this case, we want to make that bottle blue. Now, we want to do it in a non-destructive fashion. I could just play around with the color in here directly. I could go under Image. Don't do what I'm about to do, because I'm going to show you a way that works, but sucks. Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And if I pull my hue around, I can make that bottle whatever color I want. And when I hit OK, boom! It has made a permanent change to the color of that image. Look at that. That bottle is blue, but what if I wanted to change that again? Whenever we make a change to an image, whether it's changing brightness or contrast or color, we're doing damage to the file. Suffice it to say, when you make a change to an image, you're losing some of the shades of gray. If you look at the individual color channels, let's say we look at the red, green, and blue channels here. There's the red channel, there's the green channel, there's the blue channel. Basically, we've got 3 black and white photographs, and each of those is representing some of the color information, but it has a certain number of shades of gray from the darkest black to the brightest white, and you go through all these different shades of gray here. There's a total of 256 when you're working with an 8-bit image. But if you were to make a change, if I play around with the brightness or the contrast, we're going to lose some of those shades of gray. The fewer changes you make to an image, the fewer times of damaging the image you're going to go through. So this, where I did it directly to the pixels, is not necessarily a good way to do it. Now there is another way of changing the colors. Let's say at the bottom of the Layers panel, you'll see there's this little circular icon, kind of a half gray, half white circle. If you click on that, you'll see this little pop-up appear. These are called adjustment layers. And an adjustment layer is kind of like a pair of sunglasses that just kind of floats over top of the image. So if you did do the change to the pixels directly, undo that. If you go under Edit, you can choose Step Backwards until you get back to the original red color here. And then from that little half gray, half white circle there, pop up, and you'll see all the different adjustment layers. And let's go to Hue and Saturation. This will let us change, well, the hue and the saturation of the color. And you'll see this little Properties panel appears. Now, hue, let's talk about that for a second. What is hue? In color theory, hue is just the color. So right across here, we see all the different hues that are available, from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, into the indigos, the violets, and then curiously back to red. This is actually the color wheel. So if you've ever seen the color wheel, it's all the colors around the outside of a wheel, and full saturation on the outside and gray in the center. Basically split at red and pulled open into a long string. And if we pull this around, we're adjusting what the colors were relative to what they are. So right now you can see that blue would have become purple. This used to be kind of a reddish sort of color, and a reddish sort of color has become green. And the more I move this around, you'll see that this bottom spectrum kind of slides relative to the top one. So we're playing around with the hues, or the colors, in the image. So I'm going to make that nice little blue color in there. Now, saturation. What do you think saturation refers to? It's how intense or how close to pure the color is. So if I were to take that saturation and pull it all the way down, let's say I pull it all the way to the left, minus 100% saturation, it just turns gray. And if I crank the saturation all the way up, it goes, actually it was already pretty saturated. But the vibrancy of those colors starts to increase. All right. The lightness slider, don't worry too much about that. It's actually what we call evil. We don't use the lightness slider. But play around with the hue and make that bottle whatever color of liquid you want. Now, depending on how you made your selection, I made a mistake on mine. Look at what I did. The bottle is changing color, but the reflection is not. Is there anything I can do about that? There is. We're using a layer mask to reveal this effect. And if you look in the layers panel, you'll see beside the adjustment layer, there's this, well, what's now a black layer with a white shape on it. On a layer mask, white reveals and black hides. So it's hiding the color changing effect of this hue and saturation adjustment layer everywhere except on that bottle there. Is a layer mask permanent and unchangeable? No, we could grab a paintbrush and we can paint right on it. Like right now, there's the white. It's revealing the color changing effect up here, but it's black down there. If I were to take a paintbrush, and I don't have to paint on this little icon here, I can paint right over here. But if I took a paintbrush, as long as I have the layer mask selected, notice right now the adjustment layer itself has these little 4 corner points around it. This tells me that the adjustment layer is selected. But if I click on the layer mask, look at what happens. Now the layer mask is selected. And if I take a paintbrush, okay, maybe a smaller brush, if you need to change the size of a brush, you can do it from the little pop-up up here and work the size slider, or the square brackets to the right of the P key will let you change the size. And I'll just zoom in on that section down there. And as long as I have white paint selected, watch this. I can paint back in that color changing effect. And now if I play around with that slider, both the bottle and the reflection change. So nothing permanent about a layer mask. When you have a paintbrush selected, you can paint black to hide, you can paint white to reveal, and you can lower the opacity of the brush too. If you want something to be partly affected, if you drop the opacity of the brush, or if you paint with shades of gray instead of pure black and pure white, you can lower the opacity as well.